In this lesson, we're going to talk about storing values in arrays, and arrays happens to be one of those topics that computer science majors love to talk about, or at least the professors do. It's not that hard. To use the analogy we used before with the fact that a variable is like a bucket in the computer's memory where you can store a value, and you have a handle to that bucket in the computer's memory. That handle is the variable name. All right, and so anytime I want to get to that value, I can just use the variable name that I created. Or if I want to change the value that I put in the bucket, that's fine too. And also the bucket you have to create it just the right size for the type of information that you want to store. So that's why you have to give it a type. Well, arrays are kind of the same thing. You still have a bucket in the computer's memory. You still have to make it the correct data type as you define it. But think about the fact that you may have a bucket with a lot of tiny compartments inside of it. And so not only can I reference the bucket by its name, so it could be my variable, it could be the name of the array, but I can also access any of the tiny compartments, or rather any of the elements of the array, by saying I want the first element at index 0, or I want the second element inside of my bucket at index 1, and so on. Okay, so I can still hold on to the bucket using the variable name, and furthermore I can reference any of the tiny little compartments, any of the array elements, by using the index for that element. And as you probably heard me say, the first element is at index 0, the second element would be at index 1, and so on. And we'll cement this in just a moment. So array indexes are 0-based. And you also have to declare not only the data type of the array, but also you have to say how many elements or how many tiny compartments will the bucket hold when you declare the array. Now, C# has a little helper method that will allow you to resize the array. In other words, to add more or remove little tiny compartments, or rather array elements, from your array. But I don't think we're going to cover that in this lesson. But it's certainly possible to do that, to resize the array. And so we're also going to be talking about single-dimensional arrays in this lesson, and in the next lesson we'll talk about multi-dimensional arrays. And I'll explain the difference once we get to that point. So what you can see is that I've got a project, CSASP021. I forgot to add it here, but just like before, you'll be able to download, go to the before folder inside the download, grab out the project, put it in your projects folder, and you'll be where I'm at right now. And all we have here is just a number of text boxes just lined up next to each other, an add button, a retrieve button, a result label, and that's all we really need. So what I want to do is begin with the add button, and what I'm going to do is take each of the text boxes here that I've defined, and I didn't change their names from their defaults, and I'm going to write the following code. First thing I'm going to do is create an array of type string called values. So that's the handle that will allow me to get to the bucket in the computer's memory that will be an array of strings. Now, how many will it have in it? Well, that's where we do this. New string 5. So we will put 5 compartments, 5 elements of the array. We'll have 5 compartments inside of the bucket in the computer's memory called values. All right? So take a look at this nomenclature. We're using square brackets to say we're creating values as type of string array, and then we're going to create a new, and we'll talk about the new operator later. Just use the new operator, and then we're going to give it the size, how many items should be, how many compartments should be in that array. All right, so we have to initialize it to the size, or the how many elements we want in the array. Now what we can do is start putting stuff into each compartment of the bucket, or rather each array element of my array, by doing this. I'm going to go values, and I'm going to use the square bracket. I'm going to reference the first compartment, the first element of the array, and I'll set it to text box 1.text, and you can see I'm going to get to the second element of the array by using 1. So text box 2.text, and then values 2. So you can see, once again, just to reinforce this, that arrays are 0 based. If you want to access the first element of the array, you have to use index 0. The indexes are indicated in between 2 square brackets, okay? And so let me just finish up this example here. You probably know the rest of this, where I'm going here, because it's pretty obvious what the pattern is. Okay, great. Now that I've filled up the array with values, what can I do with it? Well, it's just like any other variable. I can access the values by doing this. So let's do result label.text equals, and let's just take the third element of the array and display it on screen. So we'll go values, and how will we access it? The same way that we set it, by using the square brackets, and we want the third element, so we're going to use index 2. Okay, and so we'll put that there, and now let's go ahead and run the application. And I'll just put the lost numbers here, as I'll hit 4, tab, 8, tab, 15, tab 16, tab 23, okay, and I'll click the add button. And notice that it retrieved the third element of the array at index 2, and it printed it into the result label. All right. Furthermore, it'll become important at some point for you to realize that you may need to find out how many elements are in the array. You may not know at the time at runtime. So you can do that like this: result label.text, and we'll just print the number of items. So values dot, and you can see that there's a lot of helper methods, but they have these little angle brackets after them. Ignore them for now. We'll talk about them later, okay? But it does have one that we can use called length. Let me find it here. There we go, length. It doesn't have those little angle brackets. We can use this to find out how many items are in the array. Now, of course, it's giving me, I have to do a toString on it to make it happy. All right, now let's run it. And I'll just select the values I had in there before by double-clicking the text box in Internet Explorer. Allows me to just select them, and then I'm going to click add, and it says that there's 5 elements in the array. Okay, so when we learn about iteration statements, this will come in handy. We'll need to know how many items are in the array so that we can loop through once for each element of the array. Okay, in addition to using this type of nomenclature in order to create a new instance of, or a new string array with 5 elements, I can also do it like this and just initialize it at the time when I declare it. So string, open square bracket, close square bracket, and we'll call this values again, equals new string 5. Now watch this. I'm going to use curly braces, an opening and closing curly brace, and then I'm going to put elements into the array just by typing them in. I could also use, the text property on various text boxes. I could do this all in one line of code. So let me just type here, Chuck, and then, okay, like so. So now what can we do with this? Well, let's go ahead and just put it in view state like we learned about in the last lesson. See how we do that. So view state dot add, and we'll just call this my values. We'll give it the key of my values, and then we'll just pass in the array like that. Pretty cool. And I'll go ahead and print out to the result label that we actually did it, so we get some feedback. All right, values added. All right, whoops, this needs to be values, and you need semicolon. Okay, great. And now in the retrieve button, we'll do the opposite. We'll retrieve the array out of the view state and then display the values in the various text boxes. So I'm going to type here for a minute. All right, so I'm going to have to cast this to a string array like that, and it should be happy. Now I'll have values populated with all the strings that I defined up here in the previous add button click method. Now I'll just have to do text box 1 text equals values 0, and I'm just gonna copy and paste. All right, so 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we don't need the 5th one. Oh wait, that might be interesting. Let's try that. 2, 3, 4, 5, and we'll just go back to 1 again. Okay, and then we'll go result label dot text equals values retrieved. All right, so let's go ahead and run the application. The first time we're going to get an error. I introduced an error on purpose because I want to talk about what happens when you try to set or retrieve a value that or an element that doesn't exist in the array. So let's go ahead and click add. So the values were added, all those names that I typed in initialized in the array. Now let's click retrieve, and we're going to hit our first error here, and it says that an exception of type system.indexOutOfRange exception occurred, but it was not handled in the code. So it was out of range, meaning that we try to reference a element using an index that does not exist in the array. Okay, let's try it the other way around here. I'm going to comment that line of code out, and then go up here and try to go string, and we'll try string 5 equals Andrew, and let's go ahead and run the application. Oops, sorry, values. I was doing something wrong there. So we're going to try and create or set an element, a 6th element, into a bucket that's only sized to hold 5 elements. What do you think is going to happen? Well, I think you could probably predict the failure of this application. All right, so I'll click add, and we'll get an exception of type system.indexOutOfRange exception. It was out of boundary, it was out of the range, the acceptable range of this array. It couldn't hold it in the bucket. The bucket only had 5 compartments, and you're trying to put stuff in a 6th compartment. Sorry, the runtime throws up its hands and says you can't do this. All right, no worries. Just wanted to show you what would happen. Okay, now let's see how the application really works, watching view state and how we've retrieved the view state and then cast it to an array of string. So let's go ahead and click add. Whoops, what happened this time? I did the wrong thing, sorry. Let's comment that out. Now let's run it. Okay, let's click add, there we go, and let's click retrieve, and you can see we filled in all the text boxes with the values from the string array that we initialized in the add button click event. Whew. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Keep it simple. An array is simply a bucket with many buckets inside of it, all right? Same rules apply. It has to be the right data type, and it has to have the right number of compartments. You can't access compartments that don't exist. And the way that you access the compartments, or rather the elements of the array, is to use indexes that are based 0. Okay? So we'll see in the next lesson, we'll talk about multidimensional arrays. See you there. Thanks.